Everyone was finding their seats. But when a black man walked down the aisle to his, every pair of eyes followed him. The air inside the cabin felt heavy, thick with quiet judgment. People watched in silence, pretending not to, but their stares said everything. It was the kind of unspoken scrutiny every black man feels, day after day, without a single word being said. A woman suddenly snapped, "That's my seat." He didn't argue. He simply smiled, lifted his ticket, and waited. No one around knew that the man she was trying to humiliate was the one who had built that very airline. Truth always arrives a little late, but when it does, it changes every face in the room. It was supposed to be a quiet morning. Elijah Carter, a 28-year-old black CEO who'd built his airline from nothing but sleepless nights and second chances, was finally taking a rare break, a simple flight home after sealing another major partnership. To everyone around him, he looked like any other traveler in a grey hoodie and faded jeans, blending into the crowd he'd once dreamed of leading. He wasn't flashy. He didn't flaunt success. His calm confidence came from the kind of success that didn't need to be announced. But life had taught him that no matter how high he climbed, some people only saw his skin, not his story. As he approached his seat that morning, he had no idea that a stranger's assumption was about to turn an ordinary flight into a lesson the world wouldn't forget. The cabin was filling up fast, passengers dragging carry-ons and murmuring in half-sleep voices. Elijah found his row, ready to settle in for a quiet flight. But as he reached his seat, a woman in a beige cardigan and floral blouse looked up sharply. Her eyes narrowed, scanning him from hoodie to sneakers. "This seat's taken," she snapped before he could speak. Her tone wasn't curious. It was final, the kind that carried years of entitlement wrapped in politeness. Elijah smiled gently, holding out his ticket. "I believe this ticket is mine," he said, still calm, still polite. But her expression hardened. She waved at the flight attendant, her voice rising now. "There must be some mistake. He's not supposed to be here." The words hung in the air like static. Conversations nearby softened to whispers. People turned to look, first at her, then at him. A few shook their heads. Others just watched, curious to see how it would unfold. The attendant checked the tickets. Same seat. Same row. No mistake. Still, the woman refused to move. "There's no way he's sitting here," she said, louder this time. "Put him somewhere else." Elijah felt the weight of every eye in the cabin. He'd been here before, different places, same feeling. The kind that made his chest tighten, that quiet, invisible accusation that followed him from boardrooms to boarding gates. But he didn't raise his voice. He never did. The attendant said softly. "He's in the correct seat." Her lips tightened. "Then I want to speak to someone in charge." The irony nearly made him laugh. She wanted someone in charge, and the man standing calmly before her was the one in charge, just not in the way she imagined. Elijah stepped back, giving her space, watching as the tension grew thick enough to cut. He could feel the burn of humiliation pressing in, not just for himself, but for every quiet battle he'd fought just to be seen as equal. He thought of the early years, of investors who doubted him, of meetings where his ideas were ignored until someone else repeated them. This moment was different only because the walls were smaller and the audience closer. The captain's voice came over the intercom, cheerful and routine, as if nothing unusual was happening just a few rows below. The woman crossed her arms, certain she'd won. The attendant looked apologetic, unsure how to diffuse the scene. Elijah took a breath, steady and quiet. He knew how this would look in headlines if someone filmed it. Disruptive passenger causes delay. He'd worked too hard to ever let anger write his story. Then, as the murmur swelled again, he simply said, "It's okay. I'll wait." And he did, standing there in silence while the world judged him for a crime he hadn't committed, existing in a seat he'd rightfully earned. But as the minutes ticked by and a call came from the cockpit, the balance of the moment began to shift. The woman didn't know it yet, but the person she had dismissed so easily was about to shatter every assumption she'd made. The next announcement wouldn't just change the tone of the flight, it would change everything. The tension broke not with a shout but with a voice from the front of the plane. Calm, firm, and full of authority. The flight attendant straightened suddenly. "Captain would like to see Mr. Carter before takeoff." Heads turned again. Elijah nodded once, stepping past the woman who had spent the last 10 minutes trying to erase his presence. She looked confused now, maybe even triumphant, assuming he was being removed. But as he walked toward the cockpit, Whispers trailed behind him like a wake. When he returned moments later, something had shifted. The captain followed close behind, his tone warm and respectful. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we are honored to have the founder and CEO of Ascend Airways flying with us today. Please make him comfortable. This airline exists because of his vision." Silence. The kind that fills every space at once. The woman's face drained of color. Her confidence cracked, replaced by disbelief. She turned toward Elijah as if seeing him for the first time, not as a threat, not as an inconvenience, but as the man whose name was stitched across every seat, every uniform, and every wing of the plane she sat in. Elijah didn't gloat. He simply nodded, reclaiming his seat, the one she'd tried to deny him. Around them, passengers looked away, ashamed of their quiet complicity. The hum of the engines filled the air again, but this time, the sound carried a different weight. In that brief silence before takeoff, truth had landed long before the plane ever could. Every assumption, every whispered judgment, every unspoken bias, exposed under the harsh, steady light of reality. As the plane cut through the clouds, Elijah sat quietly, staring out at the endless stretch of sky. The woman beside him hadn't said a word since the announcement. Her earlier confidence had dissolved into uneasy silence, an awkward reflection of what happens when assumptions meet truth. Elijah wasn't angry. He was tired of the quiet battles that never made headlines, tired of proving his worth in rooms, offices, and now, even in the narrow aisle of an airplane he'd built from his dreams. Still, there was peace in knowing that he hadn't needed to raise his voice. His existence, his success, was proof enough. By the time they landed, she finally whispered an apology. It was soft, almost lost beneath the hum of the engines. Elijah nodded once, accepting it, not because it erased what happened, but because he refused to carry her ignorance as his burden. He had more important things to hold onto: his purpose, his dignity, and his seat. Stories like this don't end at the runway. They live on in boardrooms, classrooms, coffee shops, and airport gates, anywhere bias hides behind politeness and assumptions disguise themselves as authority. Elijah's story is a reminder that no title, no wealth, and no achievement can shield a black man from prejudice, but it can expose it, quietly and powerfully. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or shouting. It arrives in silence, carried by the weight of truth. So the next time someone looks at another human being and decides who they are based on skin before story, ask yourself, what will it take for us to see beyond color and recognize the person in front of us? And if not now, then when?